Hey, welcome back. Well, I finally finished up the orange Honda Express 1977. I call it the Orangina Express after the not so famous orange soda. And I guess quickly, or somewhat quickly, what did I have to do to get to this point? And I got to try to remember because it's been a while. But I know I had to get, it was missing a front axle, and was it missing one of the fenders? Did I have to get a fender too? Maybe not. I had to get the side covers above the foot pegs, a new headlight. Someone had wired in a QT50 ignition switch, hot wired it in, and I bought a cheap ignition cylinder out of Malaysia or Indonesia, I forget which. And they had cut a spot on top of the headlight. Normally the ignition switch goes behind the headlight, and they'd filled that in with fiberglass. So I went with it and just left it on top, which is fine with me. I got a mirror, I lubed the brake cables, and I think the speedometer, maybe not the speedometer cable yet. Ended up replacing the throttle cable. It's got a new ignition coil, a new piston and rings. I'm running it without a head gasket for a little more compression. Had to buy a battery. Got a new rear tire, got a new new petcock, and what else am I thinking here? I had the original carburetor with an aftermarket air filter on it, and it was working fine, but I bumped it up to an SHA clone 15mm carburetor with that cone filter and gained about 2 miles an hour. So right now it does 30. And I guess while we're on this side still, when it was running, after about a few minutes of running, it'd start burning white smoke out the exhaust. So I figured that it was that left crankshaft bearing seal was bad. So after talking with Lonnie and Dale at the Detroit Motor City Riot Rally, they told me if I had the right puller, it would be a piece of cake to pull the clutch and get to that seal. And they were exactly right. Getting that starter cover back on was a little tricky, but not too bad. And anyhow, I replaced the left crankshaft bearing seal. I'll replace the right one later. And I'll tell you what, let's flip this thing around. And go over the rest of the stuff that I did real quickly, or somewhat quickly. I put a new rear tire on it. I probably ought to replace the front tire too. We'll get to that. I replaced the flywheel, it was pretty rusty, and I cleaned the points and got spark back. And of course replaced the fuel line and the fuel filter. The gas tank is in pretty good shape in terms of the condition of the interior. I kept the license plate that the seller had included with it, and just cleaned it up a little bit. Other than that, I think that's mainly it. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff. I initially bought the wrong battery. It takes a tiny, super thin 6-volt battery to fit in the compartment under the seat. I painted the exhaust with brake caliper paint, which is supposed to be good to like 900 degrees. And I quickly learned that the exhaust gets hotter than 900 degrees because that paint is burning off. And it's pretty much burned off, but whatever, no big deal. I'll sand it down and hit it with some high temp paint that can withstand up to 1500 degrees. And we'll take care of that. Oh, I bought an exhaust cover. I didn't have the exhaust cover. I replaced a lot of the hardware as well. As a matter of fact, I replaced all, except the drain screw, all the screws with Allen head bolts on the starter cover on the other side. And I replaced some of the hardware with Allen head bolts here. I disconnected the oil injector, but could possibly reconnect that in the future. I'm running premix, and so enough of that. Anyhow, this was literally a barn find. The seller had got it out of a barn, and I verified this because there was straw still attached to like the area around the center stand. So when I got it, and it was in pieces. Of course, there wasn't a front axle. Someone had it actually had cylinder studs instead of cylinder bolts, and I think all the Honda Expresses and Urban Expresses that I've ever dealt with always had cylinder bolts. I don't know in '77 if they started out with studs and then later switched to bolts, but really, because of clearance problems, you should take the frame off the engine to do any top end work. And someone neglected to do that, and they broke one of the cylinder studs. So I think I ended up removing all the cylinder studs and replacing them with bolts. And, well, let me double check that. Yes, because I had extra cylinder head bolts from my Urban Express project where I put the DR kit on and had to switch to smaller length bolts to make that work. So no turn signals on this. Everything works, and how many do I got now? 6? Out of all my bikes, this might be the most fun to ride. You know, pretty much stock. It does 30 miles an hour. It's so small that to steer it, you just lean to one side or the other for the most part. You don't even really move the wheel. And it's great for just tooling around the neighborhood. And I don't know what it is, but I have the most fun on this thing, just tooling around the neighborhood at like 30 miles an hour. I'm just going to leave it stock. I'm pretty much done with it. I love the I think it's Mars Orange is the name of the color. And I guess, like I said, the only thing I'll do is maybe switch out the front tire for some new rubber on that one, and just clean it up some more. And, well, I'll eventually have to repaint the exhaust because I screwed up. But, hey, we learn from our mistakes. And, of course, it's got this funky deal. Let's come in a little closer. I think I've seen this on other ones. None that I've ever owned. But it's got this, I don't know, keep your foot on L bracket or whatever. And I think I've seen that in pictures on other ones, but I've never had one with it. And of course it's got the wind-up start as well, which is exceedingly cool. And as a matter of fact, I'm looking at another one of these on Facebook Marketplace. I'm going to go out and see it, I think, tomorrow. So that one I've got plans for. I might turn into a rally bike because it has all the baskets if I end up getting it. And it'd be great for hauling gas and beer and tools. So maybe get it to where it'll do 40 miles an hour and make that other one a rally bike. But tell you what, let's do a, I've yammered on here for over 10 minutes. Let's start it up and take it for a little ride around the hood, shall we? All right. Let me get a close-up of the SHA clone carb setup with air filter. Go to the other side here. You might be able to see I use that MLM intake adapter. Then I just, instead of cutting a gasket, I just use some gasket maker between the adapter and the intake. If you don't do that, you're going to get a bunch of air coming in there, which is going to mess with your jetting. This has a 65 jet in it, which I think is just about perfect. And I had a smaller cone air filter on it, and whatever jet came with this clone carb was too rich, so I tried the bigger air filter, and I eventually had to, I think, you know, the original jet is a 70, it's unmarked, or maybe a 68, I don't know, I'd have to try to measure it, but a 65 seems to do the trick.